Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sally Mewies. I'm a partner at Walker Morris, leading the technology and digital team. I'm joined by Luke Jackson, who's a director in our team as well, and we've got our team of panellists and expert speakers online ready to contribute to this session. This is our Leeds Digital webinar on blockchain and sustainability. Can't say that very well. And we're delighted to be involved with Leeds Digital Festival. It's our second year of sponsoring this event, and we're looking forward to a really interesting session on blockchain. I'll introduce our other speakers in a moment, but I just wanted to set the scene a little bit and explain why we chose to do this session on blockchain and sustainability. Luke and I were reflecting actually that it's probably just about a year since we did our legal update on blockchain, where we talked about how blockchain was being deployed by businesses, how it's been integrated into our everyday life. And we looked specifically at some legal challenges around that, smart contracts, how do you enforce intellectual property rights in blockchain, data protection issues, which are always challenging in a world where nothing is changeable, and we'll come on to talk about that in a moment. But we were just reflecting how much has changed really in the last 12 to 14 months, and I don't think this is really all pandemic related. Everybody always says nowadays everything's pandemic related, and I don't think it actually is in relation to blockchain. When we spoke over a year ago, we weren't talking about NFTs. We weren't clear whether smart legal contracts were enforceable. We weren't really talking about Web 3.0 or the metaverse. Now, Anthony and the guys on the call will probably tell me that's because we're out of touch, but we hadn't really understood the impact of all these technologies. And fast forward a year, and really we are, I think, in a different world in relation to blockchain. We're seeing lots of businesses now becoming much more public about what they're doing. And we're also seeing big corporate clients, household names, our clients, who are coming to us and saying, how do we incorporate this technology into our operations? What are the illegal issues? What are the issues for us? What are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about? So when I look back over the last 12 months, I would have said that artificial intelligence technologies were probably a bit of ahead of the game in relation to blockchain, particularly where we were sitting from a legal perspective. But my sense now is that blockchain really has galloped down the tracks and is kind of out there, and there is just so many conversations going on about it. There's so many issues. People are wanting to do things with this technology. And so this is really timely, I think, for us, because it gives us an opportunity to explore how blockchain can be used in business. And it also brings in the sustainability theme, which of course is the theme for the Leeds Digital Festival this year, and to look at the sustainability elements around blockchain, because we'll all know that everybody talks about blockchain being very a high degree of energy and power needed, and maybe not so environmentally friendly. There's lots of stats and quotes going around that annually blockchain uses more energy than Argentina or Sweden. I can't remember which one it is. So lots of commentary about that, and we want to look at that in more detail in this session and just understand what the truth is really behind that, and how you can adopt those technologies in a way that is more environmentally friendly, which everybody now is obviously very conscious of. So I'm really, really pleased actually, because this isn't really going to be a legal session at all. And I have talked a little bit about the law, but it's not going to be a legal session. And we're joined by three fantastic experts, and we're really, really pleased that we've been able to get them involved in our session today. First of all, we've got Anthony Day. Anthony, give us a wave. And Anthony is formerly the head of blockchain at IBM. I think you've started a new role, Anthony. I'm sure you'll explain a little bit more about that to us in due course. And then we've got two CEOs, and co-founders of blockchain businesses. Dan Graf, give us a wave, Dan, and Gary Woodhead. And they will, again, I'm not going to try to explain what their businesses do, because I would not do it any justice at all, but they are going to talk to us a little bit about how they've built their businesses on blockchain. But can I start, Anthony, with you? I think we want to go back to basics a little bit, just to set the scene in terms of what blockchain is, because we know we've got a very diverse audience here, and there'll be some people who are interested in the topic, they'll have heard about it, they'll have heard about smart contracts, they'll have heard about NFTs, but they won't necessarily understand it. If you could do it in a kind of outcomes-based approach, i.e. what are the properties of blockchain, why is it good, rather than trying to explain all the intricacies of miners and nodes and all that good stuff, because I think sometimes people just get really confused about that. And I don't know what you think about this, but I think we're getting to a stage now with blockchain technology where we don't need to understand how it works. We just need to understand what it can do for us in our business. So can you start by just setting the scene on that?
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Hello, everybody. Very brief background. My name's Anthony Day. I've spent the last 6 years or so of my career focusing on helping enterprises and governments to engage with blockchain technology, with distributed ledgers, with tokens, with all of the kind of technology capabilities and the buzzwords that many of you will be familiar with at this point. Working with the likes of IBM, with Deloitte, and more recently I've joined a blockchain specific organization that focuses on providing the underlying ledger, the underlying layer one technology infrastructure for people and companies and application builders to create blockchains of their own and to create applications that use blockchain technologies sitting underneath them as infrastructure. So there are lots and lots of different applications of the technology, from digital assets to supply chain tracking to digital identity to credentials relating to education or medical qualifications that can be shared in a borderless and non-centralized way. That, again, every industry, every country will have a story or a use case or an ecosystem that is building with this technology, in the same way as you will with artificial intelligence, in the same way you will with cloud computing, in the same way you will with quantum. And each one of those individual communities will have their own terminology, their own jargon, their own foibles, their own belief that theirs is the best technology ever. And they're probably all right to some extent. They're all using the technology that's best for the applications in which they are being applied in the most cases. Some basic tenets of blockchain technology. Thing one is, for the most part, and there are two flavors of blockchain, there are kind of private and permissioned ledgers or databases, which allow all the parties who are working with that particular platform to know who each other are, to limit participation. For example, if you have a manufacturing company that has a number of suppliers, you don't want anybody to come in and see all the data on that particular server. You only want to see the data or share the data with the parties that you want to share it with. Think of it like a WhatsApp chat or a local area network when we all used to do gaming with computers plugged together physically. Same concept, just in a distributed cloud-based way. There are also public and permissionless blockchains, which are open to anybody, where anybody can write, anybody can read to those particular platforms. And that creates some really interesting opportunities, such as being able to have a server or a platform that is borderless, that is accessible to anybody in the world at any time, that is always switched on, that nobody can switch off or tamper with or censor. Anybody who's following what Elon Musk is proposing to do with Twitter in terms of protecting or preserving the right of free speech, to not take down particular threads as long as they apply within the rules and regulations or laws of the countries in which people are sending messages. No, we don't want bullying. No, we don't want hate speech. No, we don't want discrimination. But at the same time, we don't also want any individual company or authority to take down someone's right to share a thought or someone's right to transact based on the fact that they don't like what that person is saying, or that that person can be discriminated against or censored. We don't think those are great things either. So if you can create a global, borderless, always on, to some extent trusted platform in which anybody can then create an economic system, create a database or a shared data structure, that's a good thing in a bunch of different places. In supply chain management, as I said, in credentials management, if you want to have a registry of births, deaths, and marriages, right? At the moment, if I want to prove my university qualifications to somebody who's employing me in Singapore, I would have to go to the University of Northumbria, shout to University of Northumbria, or the University of Sunderland, shout to University of Sunderland. I will probably have to email them. They will probably then send me a PDF into my email inbox, which I will then download, I will open, I will maybe then doctor or change or modify should I feel like I want to deceive somebody. I will then save that PDF and I will email it to somebody else halfway around the world. Whereas if we had similar information stored on a shared ledger, somebody else could see that my identity, my digital wallet, has a credential that is issued to me by a third party that is validated on the system that represents the University of Northumbria. And everybody has a single source of the truth in real time without anybody being able to do anything other than just say, is this record accurate and up to date?
Yeah.
And you could take the same thing for invoices, for proof of insurance, for anywhere else where provenance of things matters, or where the identity of individuals or items or devices or vehicles matters. And then we get into tokenization, which I suspect we'll talk about later. But hopefully that's a helpful introduction as to what are the assets we get to play with, what are the capabilities we get to use, and why that matters.
Yeah.
Can I? Sorry, Dan. So Anthony. Just to pause on that, and just talking in terms of key takeaways for this session, for someone coming in just wanting to understand very fundamentally what a blockchain is. Then you mentioned it's a ledger or a database that can be accessed. You mentioned it's trusted because of the technology. I think that's probably fair to say, and probably for this session we don't really need to go into what the technology is. It's accessible at any time. It's borderless. Are there any other kind of attributes to concept of what blockchain is that I've missed there, and kind of just encapsulating the kind of the basic definition from how you see it?
For the sake of the unindoctrinated, those would be good places to start, right? Where problems like this start are where you want people to have a shared record that is always accurate, where you don't have duplication of data in different silos. Again, think university qualifications or passports, where you want to some extent automate processes. So smart contracts is a term that is used fairly often, and the old adage is that they are neither smart nor are they contracts. They are computer programs that run on this distributed network of computers that allow us to do things, to hold funds in escrow until both signatures have been completed, to validate that someone's identity is correct, or to prove that somebody has a token such that they can then gain access into a system, or that they can vote on a particular referendum. These are programs that exist in code that are initiated or activated or executed on that shared global borderless environment. So there's lots more that I can probably add, but I think as the recipe or the building blocks, those are probably the main ones.
Yeah.
The only other point about trust I would add is that the trust is that what is on the ledger has not been tampered with after it being entered. Whether that data is accurate and who entered it, and whether there was sufficient validation or certification of what happened in the real world before that data was entered, very different story.
And that's really helpful, Anthony. I think, again, just trying to break this down to the basics, I think this idea that it's a kind of active, accurate database of information and assets is really helpful, so you can trust that. I think when you move from public to permission to private blockchains, and in terms of who then controls those different environments and how they're used in companies, and I think is more challenging, because I think it then becomes difficult to say, well, if this is a private blockchain controlled by a major bank, why am I convinced that there's no central, there's no central third party who's managing this, because it's controlled by the bank. And that's, I think, where it can sometimes get quite tricky. I mean, have you got any thoughts on what types of business might go public blockchain, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and might go more permissioned private? Is it easy to silo those, or is it all evolving at too quick a pace?
The waters are muddying somewhat, but I'll give you a few characteristics of what some of the existing networks are. And when you mention private permissioned ledgers, I think there's some interesting legal concepts there that are worth considering for the legal fraternity or community that are on the call. Thing one is antitrust. This is a group of organizations creating shared technology for common good, or for common benefit. It is very difficult in certain industries like the automotive industry, finance to some extent, to have parties coming together and to agreeing and changing the industry themselves, whether there's an oligopoly or a small number of parties. So are they regulatorily sound to be modifying the way the industry works with the power that they have? Would be thing one. Thing two then is about any appropriate regulation of the technology the idea is that it is shared. So there's a shared copy of the information of the system, in the same way as the SWIFT network in banking is a shared system. It just happens to have a single entity that maintains it. In this case, we're having the collective create technology that everybody uses and maintains together. There might be a systems integrator that's responsible for developing it. But the question, as you might suggest, is if it goes wrong, who do I sue? Do I sue the collective? Do I sue the operator? If there isn't an operator, what do I do next? And so that's challenging. The main, or one of the main requirements for why you would create a private permissioned versus a public network is identification of individuals. So where you want or need to know who you are transacting with. So where you only want a small number of parties to have access to the information, or where you don't want certain data points to be written to a publicly available, constantly observable ledger. If you think that there's a kind of association between cryptocurrencies and money laundering, but actually public blockchains are one of the worst possible things you could do for money laundering, because the entire ledger is public, can be analyzed, can be reviewed. Inferences can be made as to which wallets had cryptocurrencies going from one to the other. It is literally the worst possible system for laundering money. I'm oversimplifying, but if you really want to launder money these days, some of the better pros like to use banks. So
interesting. Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I'd always thought you had to go permissioned or private to deal with money laundering issues, and to be able to, if you're a finance company, to be able to satisfy KYC. But you're actually saying it's probably better on a public blockchain.
To the same extent, you can dox yourself, you can identify yourself as an individual with a wallet address that is associated with your company to a regulator or to whoever matters. So the idea of hybrid blockchains, where some of the applications remain private permissioned, but where some of the data is written to a public ledger, where it's information that is in the public interest, such as carbon emissions potentially, or regulatory reporting, that is in the public interest and is not corporate secrets. And so you're seeing a blurring of the lines.
That's great, Anthony. Thank you. Dan, can I move on to you? So Dan is the CEO and co-founder of Earthchain. So he's actually living and running a real live blockchain business. Could you tell us a little bit about your business and how you use blockchain, and why you decided actually to set up a business based on blockchain technology?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you very much, Sally and Luke, and also Anthony, for that excellent introduction. I think that really number of points that you raised resonated with the reasons why we chose blockchain, and hopefully in this segment I can explain why. So first of all, let me give you a little bit of background about what Earthchain does. So we are a company whose mission is to enable brands to help their customers to live more sustainably. The idea being to deliver what we call carbon intelligence to the point of interaction with consumer apps or a point of sale in store or e-commerce, so that when consumers make decisions about what to buy, they can do that with full transparency of what the carbon impact is of that spend. Taking it a step further, we're working right now to be able to carbon score grocery baskets. You go to the supermarket, go to Asda, fill a basket with goods, and you check out. If you could be given an itemized list of the CO2 impacts of every product in that basket, you could make smarter choices. And the grocer could, in fact, help you as well to make those choices. Perhaps they would notice from our intelligence that you're consuming an awful lot of minced beef, and perhaps next week we'll give you 50% off a plant-based alternative that will lower your carbon footprint and maybe break down the barrier for you to trying something new. And those plant-based things are actually quite nice. I prefer them. I like them better. Okay, so what do we actually do with the technology? Well, obviously, we are a startup. Okay, we founded the company during the pandemic, actually. So initially, it was work from home. You can see now we're based here in Leeds at Nexus, but the shout out to the University of Leeds, where we can be in close proximity with the academics, and in particular those who are working on climate science here at the university. Part of what we do with the carbon intelligence is to enable people, first of all, to measure their CO2. Secondly, offer insights in how they can reduce their CO2. But there's this residual part. There's the bit left, the emissions that you can't help emitting. And to become net zero, you have to do something about those too. And the alternative that we offer there is carbon offsetting, which in itself can be controversial. And what we wanted to do with Earthchain was try to mitigate the controversial part of that. So this is what's left after you've reduced as much as possible. What you can do is you can purchase a carbon offset. It's effectively a certificate, and the funds, the money that you put in to buy the offset, they fund projects around the world which are designed to reduce CO2 emissions from happening in the first place. So to give you an example, it could be implementing a new type of cooking technology in part of the developing world where they're currently burning firewood or burning coal, filling their homes with soot and fine particulates. They can change with funding to replace those stoves with stoves that run on biogas so that they can use their agricultural waste, animal waste to generate gas, which burns a lot cleaner and has a lower CO2 output. The projects that do that are certified by standards bodies, and we chose exclusively to work with one of the more well-known ones called Gold Standard because they have a very, very good reputation for certifying projects properly with a full, transparent public audit trail. That bit's not on a blockchain. That's their world. That's part of their registry. But the difficulty for normal people to access carbon offsets is that they're sold by the ton. I mean, what are you supposed to do as an ordinary human being with a ton of carbon offset? What we wanted to make possible was what we call fractionalized carbon offsetting, so that you may have just bought a shopping basket full of goodies from Tesco. Maybe that's 85 kilos of CO2 represented there, and you want to offset that. Well, we can do a carbon offset for 85 kilos using a gold standard project where we fractionalize every single gram of that ton of CO2 into individual fractions, which allows shared ownership of that certificate. So we purchase certificates on behalf of our customers, and then we have a shared ownership of that certificate where you claim part of it. That has to be absolutely bomb-proof in terms of being able to audit and account for that CO2. So accounting brings you into ledgering. It really is a system of record that shows who owns which parts of the certificate. And we were faced with the choice of, do we build that on a database or do we build that on a blockchain? Blockchains look interesting, they're transparent, they're immutable, they're public. A lot of the attributes that Anthony described before are also attributes of carbon registries, but the carbon registries aren't geared up to be fractional. So in the end, we decided to go with a blockchain. And we did some research, we picked a certain one. I'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later, why we chose the one that we use. But what we do there is we issue a token, which you mustn't confuse with a cryptocurrency. We tokenize every ton of CO2 down into individual grams, and then we allocate it to an account which represents the emissions reduction project that is verified, certified by Gold Standard. So they go in there, it becomes a balance of our token in that account. The token isn't tradable, you can't hold it and sell it, it sits there. When an individual wishes to offset their CO2 emissions through the Earthchain system, we transfer the requisite number of grams of CO2 offset from the project they've chosen to support into an account which represents that individual on the blockchain, and then we retire them. We take away the authorization to transfer and do anything else, manipulate these tokens so that they're effectively dead in the water. That means they're retired. And what that represents is preventing what they call double counting. So, imagine if I offset a ton of CO2 and then I sold my certificate to you so that you could offset your ton of CO2. It makes no sense. It's happened and it's gone and it's done and it's in the atmosphere and we're out, and so that's why we wanted to ensure that integrity of the carbon market, of the registry, is continued all the way down to every single last gram. So you can go into our blockchain, you can trace back a single gram of CO2 all the way back to Gold Standards registry, to the audit process that was done on behalf of the project, and prove that what you've done really did come from the source. And there are challenges, as Anthony said. If it's on the blockchain, it doesn't mean it's true. So what we include on the blockchain, the network we use has fields where we can add text and store that in the entries. We store in there links back to the original registry where you can see that these blocks of CO2 offset were purchased by Earthchain on behalf of the customers, and you can reconcile it against what's in the registry.
So Dan, from a consumer perspective, a user perspective, by using Earthchain, either kind of at the point of I'm about to buy something, I guess in a future world I could immediately look to carbon offset my purchase using the technology, or I think I can kind of go through my day-to-day kind of activity, and maybe like on a monthly basis, offset myself. But the real advantage to but there are other carbon offsetting solutions, right? But the real advantage to Earthchain, as it seems based on how you've explained it, is that I can really dig into the legitimacy about what you're telling me about that carbon offsetting, and I can, because of the kind of trusted nature that yourself and Anthony have talked about, I can follow that chain back to the original good activity that was the carbon offsetting, and see the kind of the provenance. I can follow that through and get much more confidence that what I'm being told about the carbon offsetting happened. Is
Yes,
that right? Is that
you're
your
absolutely right.
intention? Yeah.
That's exactly the intention, and it's not necessarily just for the end consumer. It's useful for the end consumer to be able to trust, and that was again something that Anthony said, to use blockchain to help deliver transparency, which fosters trust. But it's for the business that stands in the middle, which could be a bank and it could be a retailer. Yeah, so although we do have an app which works with individual users, really our focus is on enabling brands, businesses, retailers, banks to do this. And it's even more important that their solution is credible. So if they have built into their source of carbon offsetting transparent guarantees that what's happened can be traced back, is fully transparently, although anonymously, auditable, then they can feel much more secure that they're working with, let's say, a partner that works with them on that journey to foster trust and ensure that the process is legitimate.
The other thing that I thought, just before I move on, that I thought was really interesting was avoiding the double counting.
Yeah. And
I can see that how this solution shows that the piece of carbon offsetting that I'm being told, or as a business we're being told, is the equivalent of your offsets your actions. You know, and you have confidence that
there is no
there is a root of the thing that you can go to, and it's not being used somewhere else.
Exactly. Yeah, you can be sure that it's yours. Yeah, Sally.
No, I was just going to say, and I think it's interesting that you had choices, didn't you, when you were developing your technical solution in order to build your business around that. And again, we're going back to this point, aren't we, that we're talking about using blockchain technology because of its accuracy, ability to share data with a number of people, and know that you're always looking at the latest record, the most up-to-date information. I think that's really critical. I think you touched on another point, the sort of challenge, and Anthony referred to this as well, the challenge between getting the off-world state of affairs accurately into the blockchain technology. When it's in there, you know it's right, but making that link is still an ongoing challenge, I guess, isn't it? And I'm thinking now that, using blockchain to have provenance of art,
I was just thinking about NFTs.
How do you actually establish that initial link between the physical world and the virtual world, which I think is really fascinating.
It is fascinating. I think for us, it's because we were able to achieve an automated integration into Gold Standard's registry because we're a partner with them. We don't have to manually onboard a ton of CO2. It all happens in the background, fully automated, and it's stamped with the blocks of CO2 offset that we've bought from Gold Standard. So you can see it in two places, on our blockchain and on the registry as well, and reconcile it that way.
And when people are dealing with you, Dan, how much weight do you think they put on the fact you're using blockchain technologies? Because I introduced you as a blockchain business, which actually now listening to you probably isn't quite right, is it? You're a business that's chosen blockchain as your technical solution as opposed to being a blockchain business. And how much do you think that weight that carries? Does that create any suspicion by your customers or partners, or does it give a big tick, or do people not really engage with that when they're working with you?
That is a really, really good question, because there's a spectrum of responses, and on one end of the spectrum are eye rolls and, oh God, he said the B word, right? And on the other end of the spectrum is like, thank goodness you're doing that, because we understand that, as I've said before, carbon offsetting can be viewed critically, because it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve the climate crisis, but it does, if done in the right way, with the right partners, with the right transparency, give you confidence that you know that the money that is being raised using carbon offsets as a means of funding projects is going to the right places. In terms of people's response to using blockchain, I think the ones who roll their eyes tend to be more cynical people, obviously, and perhaps ones who don't fully understand and think that blockchain is one thing and blockchain is Bitcoin, and therefore it's horrendous. Whereas people who understand the subtleties, and it was a research process for us to decide, A, to use blockchain, and B, which blockchain to use, because it's not one thing. It's like buying a car, there's all different cars for all different missions. Do you buy the SUV? Do you buy the sports car? Do you buy a moped? Who knows?
No, that's brilliant.
I think that's super interesting, because we were talking, I think last week, about how some of our clients who maybe aren't blockchain businesses in any way are trying to understand how blockchain can be part of their business. And it's good to get an example, a real life example, how blockchain here is kind of supplementing a core business, but it's not the business. And that's why it's great to have people who Dan and Gary that are doing this now and have practical examples, that real life use cases, because I think that helps break down the barriers.
It does, yeah. I mean, I think it's quite interesting actually, because I think a lot of our sort of what we would call big corporate clients, household names, are coming to us with questions about blockchain through marketing, because they want to build a shop in the metaverse, they want to sell Gucci shoes, and so it's coming through that. It's not, interestingly, coming through, well, I need to improve my supply chain, I need to be able to manage who's in my supply chain so I can make sure they're the right kind of people. We're not getting too much of that. We're getting much more about, I want an NFT, sorry, Anthony, you wanted to just jump in?
If I can come in on that, I mean, you've made the important identification that there is no such thing as blockchain businesses. In the same way that there are no such thing as cloud businesses, there are no such thing as AI businesses. You are offering goods and services that are enabled by the technology you have. And in some cases, people use the powered by blockchain to add extra hype or to add extra mystery, but ultimately these are still just digital capabilities you get to use. That having been said, if you are using tokens, or if you have a token-based business model, you are then creating for your users or your customers or your business partners a potential impediment or a technical requirement to be able to interact with that platform or system. In the same way as you have to, log into Facebook and create an ID, same sort of story when you're talking about cryptocurrencies and tokens. You are requiring then your business partners to have a wallet that is able to interact with a blockchain network. Potentially you are requiring them to hold cryptocurrency if they're receiving payments or if they are receiving tokens. As a result, then you have a requirement in the back office for custody management, which sits typically in treasury. You have a transformation requirement that will impact most likely finance and accounting, because those tokens may fluctuate in value, or you may have to then evaluate the NFT that you've bought. And then as a result, there is a business process change that requires to happen underneath that. So when you're talking to clients, not just about, can I make millions of dollars by selling NFTs to my clients? That's cool in and of itself, or that's interesting or innovative, or you could do something different with it. But let's not forget that there's business change required on both sides of the interaction.
Sorry, Dan, did you want to say something before we move on to Gary?
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to that. To anybody who is on the webinar now considering using blockchain, from my point of view, try to remember that blockchain isn't a solution looking for a problem. It's an appropriate tool if you have a use case for it, but it might not be the right tool. So really think about whether it's appropriate.
No, brilliant. So Gary, let me bring you in again. You have got a business in which, I'm not going to say a blockchain business now, I've changed that. I'm going to say a business in which you've utilised blockchain technology. So can you talk to us about how you're doing that, a bit about your business as well, in the same way as Dan has done, please?
Yes, certainly. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm Gary Woodhead, one of 3 co-founders of a business building on blockchain. We are not cryptocurrency. We are not crowdfunding. This is a new model. We deem it as the shared economy. And we are, in the eyes of the regulators, we are centralized finance. In terminology of money, a closed-ended fund. So what we're aiming to do is change the world's largest asset class to bring financial inclusion for the masses, real estate. So our grand vision is digitization of our business and all its future profits, and hopefully making the public the equity of the sector, i.e. the financiers and the beneficiaries. And could we do this without blockchain? 100% yes. Why have we chose to use blockchain? Well, the reality is, why would you handwrite a letter to all your clients when you could use an email? You know, it's the natural transition of new technology and how that can be integrated into a business. So yeah, we could do this traditionally, but we do believe that centralized finance via ledger technology is going to be mainstream within a handful of years. And yeah, it's an exciting place where we are. We've got the backing of HMRC because they deem our business model as something that is executable, because we're not decentralized, we're following the law of the land, we're about to be FCA regulated, unlike the other 10,000 blockchain businesses that are predominantly in the crypto space and believe that they can do as they please. And I think as a matter of time progresses, you will see the ones that are breaching regulatory law and not following the law of that jurisdiction where it is, you will start to see a lot of these effectively tracked and shut down, where there's physical people behind it as opposed to a truly decentralized product like Bitcoin. So the grand vision is, yeah, we bring financial inclusion for the public, and because we are digitizing ownership of the company's profits, what that means for UK citizens is they never have to select a real estate investment to be involved in. The digital share represents ownership of all future profits. So it's an evergreen digital security, which for the public, that removes the financial and marketplace due diligence requirements that are typically associated with traditional real estate investing. That then mitigates the risk because they have a blended portfolio. And because of digitization, the good thing for the regulators is the ledger, albeit it is private because everything's KYC, it's transparent, but it's immutable. So that's a huge positive for the regulators. You know, there's so much money laundering that takes place within real estate. Well, if we're underpinned by centralized finance on an immutable ledger, that's only a good thing for the regulators when they come in to inspect effectively the digital books. And then just to briefly touch on where we make the money, where we actually make the profits. So the other side of the business is modern method of construction. In the UK, it's typically deemed as modular. So these are homes and assets that are built off-site in a factory, delivered to site, and then engineered and effectively signed off. And where the clever spin on the modular that we're effectively making the profits from is there's around 12 technologies integrated within a house or a holiday home or a bungalow that makes these real estate assets carbon negative, energy positive. So that basically means they produce more renewable energy than they actually consume. So you've effectively got something being pioneered, not just with financial inclusion, but within real estate. Imagine having a house where you didn't have any energy bills, and that house also charged your electric vehicle for free, or stored the surplus energy in batteries, or is sold back to the grid and monetized. So we've also revealed the prototypes. The first house that we revealed a year ago produces over 10,000 kilowatts per annum. To put that into layman's terms, an average UK house only uses 4,000 kilowatts per annum. And we're just about to showcase what's deemed as the holiday lodge, kind of class it as a bungalow as well. 12 months forward, the tech has got that much better. That product produces a maximum of 21,000 kilowatts. and an average lodge stroke bungalow uses around 2,000 to 3,000 kilowatts per annum. So not only is it a very green investment, but it has the ability with scale and growth over the years to effectively decarbonize the grid, because real estate is the biggest polluter of CO2, not Bitcoin.
Fantastic.
It's interesting, isn't it, listening to Gary and Dan, where clearly sustainability and the environment is so important to them and their businesses, and it's a real tenet of what their business is trying to do, that blockchain is being used in the business. When I read lots, and eyes might start rolling at this point about the environmental cost of blockchain and these technologies. So I'm interested to understand how that's kind of reconciled a bit.
Yeah. Should we start with Anthony on that? So
What are your
is blockchain
So
sustainable?
So without
That's a
going
big question.
too far into the deep, dark mechanics of how blockchains work, there's an important distinction to make in terms of how the networks or those platforms are secured. The first generation of blockchains, read Bitcoin and Ethereum, were built on the consensus mechanism that's called proof of work. So essentially, to validate that a transaction is correct and can be written to the database or to the ledger, large, very complex computers need to solve a mathematical problem first to prove that that particular transaction is valid, that it has all of the appropriate components, that it came from trusted entities on the network, and that as a result, you couldn't fraudulently add information or edit information to the chain. That is a very computationally expensive, very energy consumptive way of securing a network. And that is not the way in which the second or third generations of blockchains have evolved. In the same way as we moved from factories that were using coal to fuel them, we've moved on to factories that use energy, and then over time we've been able to improve the electricity grid such that we're able to reduce even further the carbon footprint of running a coal-powered factory versus running a factory today. You're seeing the exact same evolution with the underlying network of nodes, or the validators that support the network of nodes in future blockchains. So most of those that were created in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years use an approach called proof of stake, which again, I'm not going to go into the mechanics of it because it's not relevant at this point, but is no more computationally expensive to issue a transaction there than it is to click and refresh a website. These are cloud-based transactions that are hosted in the same infrastructure, typically, that our e-commerce platforms, our banking networks, and so on are supported, with the exception of on-premise computing, which is a different story. Long story short, if you're using Ethereum to support your applications, at the present time, that is computationally expensive, energy consumptive.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, bad scene. If you're using any one of the other top 20 blockchain platforms that you can build applications on top of, different story. You are using a platform that is no more energy consumptive than traditional servers that are cloud-based.
Gary, did you want to comment on that as well in terms of the sustainability of blockchain?
Yeah, there's so much misinformation out there.
Yeah.
With regards to the footprint of this space. I try to look at this collectively as the realities of why miners are doing this. So the industrial scale miners, they're in it for the money, and if they can run their consensus through free, renewable, sustainable energy, they will, because it's more profit.
Yeah.
Yes, there will always be an argument, but you could look at the other side of the fence and say, how much energy does every Visa terminal consume in a shop?
Yeah.
Compare the two. It's about something moving from A to B, and what is the cost of energy for that transaction to occur. Yeah. So I think it's one that will never be put to bed. You will always have the pro Bitcoin, pro blockchain people trying to defend it. Yeah. And then you will have the traditional entities that effectively this new technology is a threat to their business. Things like Forex. You know, you look at the money that's made where there is middlemen, so to speak, through transactions globally. Well, blockchain has the ability to effectively remove that market completely because it's borderless. So I think it's an argument that we'll all still be talking about when we're in care homes.
It's interesting actually, because it does always seem to be Bitcoin that is mentioned in these shocking statistics. But as Anthony's saying, actually the proof of mechanism that is chosen actually is a massive determining factor in the kind of energy cost. Dan, I think when you were kind of talking about Earthchain, you touched on the blockchain that you've built on. Do you want to? And I understand that there's some sort of thinking with what we've been talking about in that decision. So could you elaborate on that a bit for us?
Absolutely, yeah. So, like I said, and like Anthony said, there isn't one blockchain. There's a whole bunch of them. It's like choosing a vehicle. And you know, you wouldn't use a chainsaw to slice your dairy cheese, would you? You'd use a little knife. You use the appropriate tool for the job. So, you know, when you look at something like Bitcoin with its terrible reputation, and you compare it to a more efficient blockchain like the one we use, that it is worlds apart. Okay, so. At the time, it was, I think in 2019, the very first part of Earthchain that we built was the blockchain piece, because that was a critical core of what we do. So that was the moment where we had to make the selection, do we build a database or do we build a blockchain? Okay. I'll talk in a minute about why it was a blockchain specifically with relationship to sustainability, but it was a blockchain. That's what we decided to do. Then it was which blockchain? And we chose to use a blockchain called Stellar. So Stellar is, it uses a consensus protocol that's kind of based on messaging, sending messages around, which is actually very similar to how a database would work as well. It uses computers that are geographically dispersed through the world, and you need to get agreement between some of those computers for the transaction to be considered complete. And it's low computational intensity compared to something like blockchain. So I have some stats for you. Here's some actual numbers. So one Stellar transaction is about 0.2 watt hours of energy. So it's quite a low number. A Bitcoin transaction is that times 10 to the power of 7. So 10 with 7 zeros on the end. It's ludicrous. So the Stellar one's 0.2 watt hours. A Visa card payment is around 1 watt hour. So it's even less than a Visa card payment. So first of all, the energy intensity of it was for us ideal. Secondly, on the Stellar blockchain, there's not too much mucking about. There's not monkey pictures and stuff like this. That's not my world. I wanted something simple without too much BS attached to it, where we could build a ledger quite simply, quite straightforwardly, where we could issue a token. The token is not tradable. It's not a cryptocurrency. It's just a fractionalization. And when you come to look at the overall benefits of building on this system, had we chosen the database, we would have had to have a geographically distributed database for resilience. So if one data center goes down, we carry on with another, which implies replication, storage, and backup. We get that as part of Stellar anyway. The other thing with Stellar, we can run our own servers, so we can use some of other people's nodes and some of our nodes. The ones that are in our control, we can ensure they go into data centers that are genuinely powered by renewables. And we can keep an eye on the CPU usage. The messaging becomes more efficient. There's the fewer overheads in terms of sending it all the way around the world. So we get control of that too. So Stellar was a clear choice for us in the end.
Yeah. Gary, did you go through a process of deciding which blockchain technology would work for you? How did you approach that?
In all honesty, no, we're quite blockchain agnostic. It was interesting because when we founded the business way back, to actually build on a common protocol then, such as ETH, we were being quoted prices of north of $500,000 because there were so few specialists that could actually develop smart contracts.
Wow.
So as a centralized regulated business, we left it until the last piece of the jigsaw, because until you're regulated, you can't solicit your
yeah,
business
yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
It was pointless to kind of go down that rabbit hole in 2018. I can tell you the protocol that the devs are currently building out on is Solana. Will we be on that protocol in 2, 3, 4 years' time? Possibly, possibly not. But no, we didn't go as deep as Dan went with regards to, you know, what is per transaction. And I think it is going to be an ever evolving space. It's like fashion. This is never going to be a done thing. It's always going to evolve. You look at some of the new protocols that Anthony's talked about, like Solana as an example. It claims to be far more advanced than what ETH is. The coding is simpler, so you have a larger spectrum of developers that can work with it, as opposed to a different type of protocol that's more complex. But yeah, for us, it's our cause is all about the financial inclusion, the regulation,
Get it.
and the renewables in real estate.
I've got a question as well, actually. When we started looking at cloud services agreements years ago, there was always this big fear. I mean, I'm talking about when I first started doing my cloud service agreements, probably 15 years ago, probably more. There was always this big fear about lock-in. So you'd choose a cloud provider, they'd take your data, you'd never be able to get it back, you'd be kind of locked in. I was just interested in what Gary was saying about evolution of technologies here, and how easy is it to move from a blockchain to another blockchain? Are we going to be facing, as the market evolves, are we going to be facing the same issues that we faced around cloud, that, well, I built my business on Stellar, but really there's a better, Ripple's better, but I can't migrate from Stellar to Ripple? Is that a thing, or anybody want to take that question?
I'll have a go at that one, because there's a couple of components to that one. You know, firstly, any transactions and any states that are written to any one particular ledger today will be there forever. There's a level on top of that, which is what is the execution environment? What is the platform on which you choose to execute your applications? So in which you use the shared security, in which you are then allowing others to connect to, and on which you pay transaction fees. In some cases, not all blockchains actually require transaction fees. But so, for example, today, if you have your application running on Ethereum, you're going to pay relatively high transaction fees, and you're going to get modest throughput in terms of the number of transactions you can get per second. You compare that to some of the Ethereum alikes who trade off lower fees, higher transaction throughput. So a lot of the second generation blockchains will tell you, no, move to our chain, it's better. Well, yes, it's better now, and it's better relative to Ethereum. But over the longer term, what else are you doing other than having one single language and different operational performance? Now, this is a domain that's called blockchain maximalism, or chain maximalism, saying mine is the best blockchain, therefore use this. There are some bridges and interoperability capabilities between chains. So typically, most of them map to Ethereum, because Ethereum has the largest ecosystem at the moment, the largest number of other applications that you connect to. That's called Ethereum virtual machine compatibility. So you can have interoperability or communication between Ethereum and other chains, and lots of other blockchains are then looking at creating bridges, both for transactions and data, to enable you to then move around a little bit more easily. You then look at third generation blockchains like Polkadot, for example, where actually over time they will not just have bridges and interoperability, they'll also be able to modify the performance and the characteristics of the individual blockchains on the network, such that actually it is constantly evolvable, it is constantly flexible, it can constantly be updated, rather than saying, here's your one chain that you will use forever. It might move a little bit, but to make any material changes for regulatory reasons or whatever, you've got to break the whole thing and start again. That is a domain that's important, but it's not super simple to migrate at this point in time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it sounds like similar to your cloud example, as the technology grows, the answer might change.
Yes, exactly.
Hybrid cloud is a thing because actually many enterprises have multiple cloud environments and you need to orchestrate them. It may well be a world where you have multiple blockchain environments and you need to orchestrate them too.
I think we might need to do a part 2 after seeing the time.
Gary, did you want to add anything to that in terms of migration?
I think for us, it's implicit because we simply use the blockchain as a system of record. So once we've consumed an entire ton of CO2, we can break into the next ton on a different chain if we want. It's a matter of migrating to a new tech.
Supporting.
For different accounts, it's fine. Yeah.
So I think maybe we've come to the end of the session. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much, all three of you. Is there one sort of final message you want to give our audience? And it can be blockchain sustainability message, or it could just be a blockchain message. Gary, do you want to start?
I would say don't tarnish the market because of the ICO space from 2017. There were a lot of bad actors in that, and a lot of people and institutions still frown upon blockchain because of those bad actors. You know, educate yourselves. It's an interesting place.
Yeah. Dan?
Absolutely agree with what Gary said, and that sentiment from me as well. Don't consider blockchain as one big thing. Look into it. It's a whole sweeping thing. It's like saying databases. There's a billion things you can do in there. So have an open mind and explore it and enjoy it. And if anybody wishes to connect after this and talk about blockchain and go deeper into how you select a chain, I'm happy to talk. I guess the other chaps on the call as well. Likely want to involve themselves too. So great.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Very, very happy for people to connect with me. I have a podcast that I put out usually once a month that's designed for people with non-technical experience to help understand how is blockchain being used in the real world in a number of different countries as well. We've covered Brazil, Malta, Israel, Japan, Germany, Netherlands, and a bunch of others, Singapore, UAE, that give kind of relatable, hype-free examples of how the technology is really being used, so you can kind of digest that in your own time. This is a very approachable technology. It has its complexities, as every technology does, but it is being used in every country by every industry at this point in time. The associations or the misunderstandings of 3, 4, 5 years ago, it's a very, very different scene with a very, very different level of maturity now. And it's not a technology that works in every application. It's not a technology that's needed by everybody all of the time, but some of the capabilities that we have are valuable in a bunch of different settings. And that's just growing every day. If anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, come out with any questions, or just kind of follow the stuff that I'm putting out there in terms of education, please feel free.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Dan and Gary and Anthony. That's been a fantastic session. I think for me, the takeaway is just you look at this technology as technology that can utilize your aspirations as a business. And when you're looking at business transformation, when you're looking at bringing in new technology into your business, blockchain has got some properties that are really going to make you take a big leap forward in terms of what your business can do. And for me, that's the big thing that's come out of this session, actually, for me. It kind of is just how transformational that can be. And as people move towards metaverse and Web 3.0, these technologies are definitely going to be part of that transformational journey. But fantastic session. We could have done with more time, couldn't we? I think we've got some questions. We will come back to people who put questions in, and we'll answer those over email. But thank you all. Thank you for joining as well. And I will just plug our technology and digital newsletter, which Luke said to me, make sure you plug the technology and digital newsletter. Go onto our website and sign up to that. It's not law. It's just got lots of updates about what's happening in the tech world. So please do sign up to receive that. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for your time.
Bye.